Before we get into the Republican primary debate tonight, we have some news out of Texas in a rally. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who had recently dropped out, has endorsed Greg Abbott for president, stating that he believes that Greg Abbott will change the American system like he has changed the governmental system in Texas. Welcome to the first Republican primary debate. We have the results of how each candidate performed. They performed at St. Edward's University. Chris Christie, whose performance was an A-, rallied up the crowd with striking one-liners. However, his enthusiasm was meh. His base wasn't too thrilled with his performance. His appearance was a B+, however, he looked strong on his issues and didn't look weak throughout the debate. However, and it might seem like he will appeal to new voters after this debate. Liz Cheney had an F in performance. She performed very poorly. Didn't seem to have enough enthusiasm with the crowd. Bored the crowd. They always had late reactions to her. After she done speaking, late reactions to clap for her, and they weren't loud claps either. However, this did get her small base of anti-Trump Republicans to rally up for her. Her appearance was F+. She looked very weak, didn't look strong at all in the issues as other candidates attacked her for her record against Donald Trump. And this may or may not appeal to new voters. We will just have to see. Ben Carson, his performance was a D+, as his performance in other debates throughout the years. He was calm, waited for his turn, and spoke very softly. This did not rally up his base at all. His appearance was an F, as he did look weak throughout the debates. We are very certain that he will not gain any new voters throughout this debate. Larry Hogan, he had a strong performance at the debate, was strong on most of the issues, didn't appear weak. However, his appearance, of course, he did look weak in some areas, strong on others. We do not know if this will garner him any new support or not. Tom Cotton had a below average performance at the debate. His base was not too thrilled with him afterwards, though, as he did look weak when it came to certain issues such as foreign policy. However, despite all of this, we can say that he will garner at least some new support from this. Nikki Haley had an above-average debate performance. This did rile up her base, fired it up. She did look strong on every single issue, which is good news for her campaign. However, we do not believe she will garner any new support from this. Kristi Noem, her performance was terrible. Her base was kind of meh on her performance. She looked weak on a lot of the issues. However, we can expect her to gain some new support based off of a poll, the post-debate poll. Greg Abbott, he had a below-average performance at the debate. He did rile up his base quite strongly as he got some of the loudest cheers at the debate, though it was in Texas. His appearance, though, was below average. Sometimes he looked weak, and we don't know if he'll garner any new support from this debate or not. Rick Scott, he had a below-average performance. His base wasn't fired up as some of the other candidates did. He looked weak on a lot of the issues, and we do not believe he will be able to garner any new support from this debate. Ben Sasse, the man at center stage of this debate, had a pretty strong performance overall. However, his base wasn't too fired up from his performance. He looked weak on the issues, as he was a never Trump Republican, as he was being ganged up by some of the other Trump Republicans. However, he did have a good, strong performance, however, but it was mostly to appeal to new voters, and we do expect him to gain some new support. Before this debate started, Nikki Haley decided to go from Texas to South Carolina to hold a rally, where apparently recently dropped out candidate Senator Tim Scott has endorsed fellow South Carolinian Nikki Haley for president, which is good news for Nikki Haley. However, we don't know if this will help her much at all, as Tim Scott was really her only opposition in the state of South Carolina, which we now expect her to win without much opposition. Night 2 of the Republican primary debate. Here we do have the results. Kanye West performed very terribly. He did not fire up his base at all. However, when he did get to speak, which wasn't often, he looked strong. He was passionate about what he was talking about. So we don't know if he will gain any new support from this or not. Mike Pence had a below average debate performance. His base did not get fired up from this performance at all. His appearance was meh. He looked strong on some issues, not so much on others. However, we do expect him to gain at least some new support just appearing at the debate alone. Next is Governor Jim Justice. He had an average performance which fired up his base quite tremendously. However, and he did look strong on a lot of issues, though we don't know if this will be able to garner him any new support or not. Charlie Baker had a below average performance at the debates, which fired up some of his base, but not all of it. However, he looked strong on a lot of the issues, firing back at candidates who critiqued his record. And we do expect him to garner some support from this, though. Next up is Senator Ted Cruz, who had one of the best performances out of either debate. This fired up his base, however, not as much as he'd hoped. And he looked strong throughout. However, we doubt he will gain any new support from this. He actually might lose some support. Next up is Senator Mitt Romney, who had another one of the best performances of either debate. This fired up his base. As many say, he is the leading anti-Trump candidate amongst the Republican field. However, he looked weak on a lot of issues, even going on a tyrant or a rant midway through the debate. And because of that, we don't expect him to gain much support from this. If he doesn't, he might even lose some support from some moderate Republicans who don't like the rant he made. Next is Senator Josh Hawley, who had a strong debate performance. However, he did say some things that the America First base didn't like his support for the $15 minimum wage. However, he looked strong in defending himself, but because of his support for the $15 minimum wage, we're expecting him to actually lose support from this debate. Next is Senator Chris Sununu, who had an A- performance, which is a good performance. Again, another great performance, which fired up his base. However, he did look weak on some of the issues, and because of this, we do expect him to lose some support. Next is Governor Ron DeSantis, who had a pretty solid performance, just though not as good as some people would like, which is why not all of his base was fired up from his performance. And he did look weak in a couple of spots there, which, everyone has their off days. So because of this, we are expecting Ron DeSantis to lose support because of this debate. And finally, we had center stage at night 2, even though it says night 1, it's supposed to say night 2. We have Tucker Carlson, who had a solid performance. However, many people, his base was expecting more from him, so their base wasn't as hyped up as they should have been. However, he did look strong on a lot of issues. We do not know whether he will gain any new support from this debate or not. At a rally at Atlanta, Georgia, Senator John Ossoff, who had recently dropped out of the election, has gone on to endorse Stacey Abrams at her rally. John Ossoff, which now is being considered a top vice presidential candidate for some. However, he can't be Stacey Abrams' vice presidential nominee because of the Constitution. This is going to help Stacey Abrams within the Atlanta suburbs, even though she already had that covered. At a rally at Richmond, Virginia, Senator Tim Kaine, another recently dropped out candidate, came out for his support for Vice President Kamala Harris. This is going to widely help Kamala Harris in the state of Virginia. Another recently dropped out candidate, this time Senator John Hickenlooper. He has gone on to endorse fellow Coloradian, the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. This is of course a pattern, as many people from their home state are endorsing people who share the same state as them. So it is no surprise here that Hickenlooper has gone on to endorse Jared Polis for president. Kamala Harris has made another rally today, this time in Newark, New Jersey, the hometown of Cory Booker, Senator Cory Booker, where he appeared to give his endorsement to Kamala Harris. And of course, Cory Booker is speculated to be a vice presidential candidate or on the short list, the very early short list for Kamala Harris. So we'll just have to see how things play out. We now have a 2024 general election poll for the state of Minnesota between Congressman Ruben Gallego and Candace Owens. Ruben Gallego is leading Candace Owens by around 8 percentage points in this poll, which is actually a increase in support from Biden's support in Minnesota, which was a 7-point victory if this were to happen in 2024. We've got a poll out of Missouri, a 2024 general election poll between Chris Christie and Mark Cuban. Christie is leading Mark Cuban by 12 points in this poll, which is an underperformance of 2020 as Donald Trump ended up winning the state by around 15 points. This could be because of Mark Cuban's moderate, sort of populist appeal and Chris Christie's scandals. The first Democrat primary debate, night 1, we have the results out of the University of California in Sacramento. Ayanna Pressley had an average performance, which boosted her support among her base and kind of meh on the others. Her appearance was above average. She looked strong on some issues, weak on others. However, we expect her to lose support from this debate. Senator John Fetterman had a below-average performance, which didn't fire up his base enough. He looked weak on some of the issues despite his large size. We do expect him to lose some support, however not much. Businessman Howard Schultz had a below-average performance. This did not fire up his base at all. A lot of them were disappointed. And he did look weak on certain issues. However, we do expect him to gain more support as he does pour in more money into his campaign. Next is Secretary Tom Vilsack, who had an abysmal performance, one of the worst in either debate. However, despite this, his base was fired up. He did look strong on certain issues, especially when it came to the issue of agriculture, which he is the secretary of. However, we do expect him to lose support from this. Next up is Elizabeth Warren. She had an above-average performance, which did fire up her base. And she did look strong on every single issue except one, which is when AOC called her out on her record of supporting progressive policies, including not backing Bernie Sanders in either 2016 and 2020, who she says she's running for president for. She quoted when she launched her campaign, she is running in honor of her late friend Bernie Sanders. And AOC also called her out when it came to her holding big money fundraisers for Joe Biden after she said she wouldn't do so during her presidential campaign. So we do expect Elizabeth Warren to lose a good amount of support from this debate. Governor Andy Beshear had an above-average performance. His enthusiasm, his base wasn't too thrilled. However, some were happy with it. It was just average. His appearance was below average. He did look weak on some of the issues. However, we do expect him to gain some support as he was a minor candidate with an above-average performance. Next up is Vice President Kamala Harris, who had an above-average performance, which is a lot better than her 2020 debate performances. However, her base was not riled up at all. A lot of them said she could have done a lot better. She did look weak on a couple of issues when she was attacked by other candidates. So we still don't know if she'll lose any support or not. We'll just have to wait and find out. Her base is pretty loyal to her. Next up is Governor Roy Cooper, who had an above-average performance, or actually had one of the best performances of either debate stage. Excuse me. However, his base wasn't too thrilled, saying that he could have done better. He looked weak on a lot of issues, which is why his base said he could have done better. However, we are expecting him to gain support from this debate. Next up, we had Sherrod Brown, who had one of the best debate performances of either night. His base was fired up from it. However, he did look weak on a lot of issues. So, because of this, we don't know if he'll gain any support from this debate or not. Next up, at center stage, Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who had a below-average performance. His base wasn't fired up from his performance. He looked weak on a couple of issues. However, we do expect him to gain support from this as Kamala Harris is starting to linger a bit. Next, we have a 2024 poll It is a poll out of Maine. We have between Democrat Ayanna Pressley and Republican Chris Sununu. Ayanna Pressley has a 5-point lead over Chris Sununu. This makes the state a likely margin in this race, but in a hypothetical race between these two, which would make Maine 2nd District likely Republican. We have the results from the second night of the Democrat primary debates. Governor Deval Patrick had one of the best performances out of both nights. However, his base was disappointed that he looked weak when discussing some of the issues. However, we do expect him to gain support from this debate, however. Governor Jared Polis had a below-average debate performance, which his base was not happy with. However, he did look strong when it came to issues such as the LGBT issue, so we do expect him to gain support from that. Next up, Governor Stacey Abrams, who had a below-average debate performance, which didn't make her base at all happy. She looked strong on a lot of issues, weak on others, but we don't know whether or not she will gain any support from this or not. Next up is former First Lady Michelle Obama, who had a below-average debate performance, which didn't fire up her base at all. She looked weak on a lot of issues. We do expect her to lose support from this. Many are questioning why she is still running for president, as she clearly doesn't have the charisma that her husband had. Next is Senator Amy Klobuchar, who had an above-average performance. However, her base wasn't too thrilled with her. She did look strong, though. We don't know why her base wasn't happy with her. It was a pretty solid performance, and we do expect her to pick up support from this debate. Next up is Senator Tammy Baldwin, who had a terrible performance, one of the worst. However, despite this, her base was still riled up. She looked weak on all of the issues, but we don't know whether or not she will lose or gain support from this debate. Next up is Governor Tulsi Gabbard, who had an average debate performance. Her base pretty much gives a meh on her debate performance. However, she looks strong when talking about every single issue. We do expect her to gain support from this debate. Next up is Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who had one of the best performances of either debate. However, her base wasn't too thrilled with her, despite her looking strong in most of the issues. And we do expect her to gain support from this debate. Next up is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had a below-average performance. Her enthusiasm was meh. Her appearance was god-awful, as she looked weak on every single issue, except when she called out Elizabeth Warren. And her appeal, we do expect her to gain support from this, as she did call out Elizabeth Warren, as they did not share the debate stage with each other. However, she still called out Elizabeth Warren during her opening speech, calling her out by name, and Elizabeth Warren having a terrible response on Twitter. And the man at center stage, Mark Cuban, had a above-average performance. However, his base wasn't as fired up as many would have hoped, and he did look weak. However, this was his first time on a debate stage, similar to Howard Schultz. However, we do expect him to gain support from this. We now have the 2024 Republican primary poll results for the month of June. We can now say that Ron DeSantis now leads the pack at 9.8%. Close behind him in second is Tucker Carlson at 8.9%. Third is Senator Chris Sununu at 8.5%. Fourth is Senator Josh Hawley at 7.6%. In fifth is Senator Mitt Romney at 6.3%. Senator Larry Hogan is at 4.5%. Senator Rick Scott is at 4.4%. Former Vice President Mike Pence is at 4%. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is at 3.9%. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is at 3.6%. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is at 3.5%. Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse is at 3.4%. Governor Jim Justice at 3.1%. Former Secretary Ben Carson is at 3%. Governor Charlie Baker is at 2.9%. Governor Mike Lindell is at 2.8%. Former Governor Chris Christie is at 2.7%. Rapper Kanye West is at 2.6%. Congresswoman Liz Cheney is at 2.5%. Senator Ted Cruz is at 2.4%. Senator Tom Cotton is at 2.3%. And Candace Owens is at 2.2%. We now have a 2024 poll out of Nevada. But we have pitted up Republican Liz Cheney and Democrat Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg has a 2-point lead over Liz Cheney. However, neither candidate is over 50%, which does say that Nevada could end up being a very tight battleground state this year, or in the coming election. We now have the 2024 Democrat primary poll results for the month of, this is supposed to say June, the month of June. In first, Sherrod Brown has a pretty big lead for the massive field. At 13%, Sherrod Brown is leading. And second is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez with 8%, getting a bunch of support from Elizabeth Warren, as you'll see her in a little bit. And third is Vice President Kamala Harris at 7.2%. Fourth is businessman Mark Cuban at 6.7%. Next is Secretary Pete Buttigieg at 6.6%, who is taking a huge bump after the debate. Senator Amy Klobuchar is at 6.3%. First Lady Michelle Obama is at 4.9%. Governor Roy Cooper is at 4.8%. Senator John Fetterman is at 4%. Governor Tulsi Gabbard is at 3.9%. Governor Stacey Abrams sits at 3.6%. Senator Kyrsten Sinema has 3.5%. Governor Jared Polis sits at 3.4%. Secretary Tom Vilsack is at 3.1%. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is at 3%. Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin is at 2.9%. And Elizabeth Warren, taking a huge dive, sits at 2.8%. After being in the top 5 not that long ago, is now in the bottom category of candidates after her terrible response to AOC's critique at the second Democrat debate. Ruben Gallego is not that far from her, as he sits at 2.7%, gaining some of the disenfranchised Warren vote that no longer supports her. Andy Beshear is next, sitting at 2.6%. Howard Schultz is at 2.5%. And finally, Deval Patrick is at 2.4%. We have 2024 Republican Utah primary poll results, as Mitt Romney is leading his home state at 39.3%, which he is the only candidate to break 15%, meaning he would win all of Utah's pledged delegates. Next is Ted Cruz, who is at 8.9%. Nikki Haley has 7.1%. Mike Lindell has 5.4%. Kanye West has 5.3%. Liz Cheney has 3.6%. Jim Justice has 3.5%. Greg Abbott has 3.4%. Ben Sass has 3.3%. Candace Owens is at 3.2%. Josh Hawley is at 1.8%. Mike Pence is at 1.7%. Chris Christie is at 1.6%. Ron DeSantis is at 1.5%. Tucker Carlson is at 1.4%. Chris Sununu is at 1.3%. Ben Carson is at 1.2%. Charlie Baker is at 1.1%. And Larry Hogan is at 1%. And last in this poll, as other candidates didn't get any support from this poll. We have poll results for a Kansas Republican primary poll. Ted Cruz leads this poll, and he leads for the second time in this poll, this time at 23.2%. And the other candidate to break 15% is Ben Sass, who is at 16.1%. Thus, Cruz and Sass would be the only two candidates to earn delegates if this poll were to hypothetically occur. Ron DeSantis has 7.1%. Nikki Haley has 7%. Mike Pence has 5.4%. Candace Owens has 5.3%. Mike Lindell has 5.2%. Mitt Romney has 3.6%. Tucker Carlson has 1.8%. Josh Hawley has 1.7%. Ben Carson has 1.6%. Kristi Noem has 1.5%. Greg Abbott has 1.4%. Tom Cotton has 1.3%. Liz Cheney has 1.2%. Larry Hogan has 1.1%. Charlie Baker is at 1%. Chris Christie at less than a percent, 0.9%, and Kanye West is last in this poll at 0.8%. We now have results from a Maine primary poll for the Republican side. Chris Sununu is leading in this poll and is the only candidate to break 15%, so if this poll were to hypothetically become a reality, Chris Sununu would be the only Republican to would win all of Maine's pledged delegates. Ted Cruz is the closest behind him at 7.1%. Mike Pence is at 5.4%. Rick Scott is at 5.3%. Candace Owens is at 5.2%. Mike Lindell is at 5.1%. Liz Cheney is at 3.6%. Ron DeSantis at 3.5%. Mitt Romney's at 3.4%, Nikki Haley's at 3.3%, Ben Sass 3.2%, Tucker Carlson 1.8%, Josh Hawley 1.7%, Jim Justice 1.6%, Larry Hogan 1.5%, Kristi Noem 1.4%, Greg Abbott at 1.3%, Charlie Baker at 1.2%, and Chris Christie is in dead last at 1.1%. No other candidate received any support from this poll. We now have results from the 2024 Republican Minnesota primary poll, as Mike Lindell is leading in his home state with 37.5%. Similar to other polls, if this were to happen, Mike Lindell would win all of Minnesota's pledged delegates, since he's the only one to break 15%. Mike Pence is closest to him at 7.1%. Then it's Ron DeSantis at 7%, Ted Cruz at 5.4%, Chris Sununu at 5.2%, Kristi Noem at 5.1%, Ben Sass at 5%, Candace Owens at 4.9%, Nikki Haley at 3.6%, Larry Hogan at 3.5%, Liz Cheney at 1.8%, Josh Hawley at 1.7%, Tucker Carlson at 1.6%, Jim Justice at 1.5%, Greg Abbott at 1.4%, Charlie Baker at 1.3%, Christie at 1.2%, and Kanye West in last with 1.1%. We now have some primary polling for the state of Indiana on the Democrat side. Once again, Pete Buttigieg leads in his home state, I think by a bigger margin than last time we polled the state. He is the only candidate to break 15%, thus he would win all of Indiana's pledged delegates in this scenario. He has 46.4% of support, which is almost a majority in this state. If this was a Republican poll, if you were to get a majority, you would win all the delegates outright no matter what. However, this ain't the Republican side, and you would still win delegates even if someone were to win a majority. Ayanna Pressley has 8.9%, the closest to Buttigieg. Deval Patrick is at next with 8.8%. Tammy Baldwin is at 7.1%. Amy Klobuchar is at 7%. Stacey Abrams at 5.4%. Sherrod Brown at 3.6%. Elizabeth Warren at 3.5%. AOC at 1.8%. John Fetterman at 1.7%. Ruben Gallego at 1.6%. Tulsi Gabbard with 1.5%. We have some more primary polling for the Democrats, this time in West Virginia. Mark Cuban is the only candidate to break 15%, so hypothetically he would win all of West Virginia's pledged delegates. He sits at 17.9%. Ayanna Pressley is next, sitting at 8.9%. Deval Patrick is at 8.8%. Sherrod Brown is at 7.1%. Amy Klobuchar is at 7%. Tammy Baldwin is at 6.9%. Stacey Abrams at 5.4%. Kamala Harris is at 5.3%. Michelle Obama is at 3.6%. Elizabeth Warren is at 3.5%. Roy Cooper is at 3.4%. John Fetterman's at 3.3%. Andy Beshear is at 3.2%. Ruben Gallego is at 3.1%. Tulsi Gabbard's at 3%. Pete Buttigieg is at 1.8%. AOC is at 1.7%. Kirsten Sinema is at 1.6%. And Jared Polis is at 1.5%. Next up, we have polling out of the state of Mississippi. Similar to West Virginia, Mark Cuban is the only candidate to break 15%. Last time we polled this state, Stacey Abrams was actually the only candidate. This time it's Mark Cuban, as Abrams is pretty close behind, as well as Deval Patrick, to breaking 15%, well within the margin of error. So we'll have to see what happens. Mark Cuban is at 17.9%. Stacey Abrams at 12.5%. Deval Patrick is at 12.4%. Michelle Obama is at 8.9%. Ayanna Pressley is at 8.8%. Kamala Harris is at 7.1%. Tammy Baldwin is at 7%. John Fetterman's at 3.6%. Jared Polis at 3.5%. Tulsi Gabbard at 3.4%. AOC at 1.8%. Elizabeth Warren at 1.7%. Pete Buttigieg at 1.6%. Amy Klobuchar at 1.5%. Roy Cooper at 1.4%. Andy Beshear at 1.3%. Howard Schultz at 1.2%, and Ruben Gallego at 1.1%. We do have some breaking news for the Senate elections next year. The second longest Democrat Senator Dianne Feinstein, has announced that she will not be running for re-election next year, meaning the California Senate primary is wide open. This is big news for California Democrats. We now have some primary polling out of the state of Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar is the only candidate to break 15%. However, Tammy Baldwin is within the margin of error, so she could also break 15% with the possibility. However, Klobuchar would win all of the pledged delegates if the exact same results were to happen. Tammy Baldwin is at 12.5%. Ayanna Pressley is at 8.8%. Deval Patrick is at 8.8%. Sherrod Brown is at 7.1%, Elizabeth Warren at 5.4%, Stacey Abrams at 5.3%, AOC at 3.6%, Michelle Obama is at 1.8%, Kirsten Sinema at 1.7%, and Ruben Gallego at 1.6%. Out of a rally out of Salem, Massachusetts, Deval Patrick was endorsed by Congressman Seth Moulton. He came out and spoke in front of the crowd and said that Deval Patrick is, in his opinion, the best candidate currently running for the office of the presidency. And again, this won't help Deval Patrick much, as him and Seth Moulton do share a home state. We have a huge news right now, as after weeks of criticism from many progressives, Elizabeth Warren has officially dropped out of the Democrat primary, which was a huge shock, as she was one of the frontrunners, and well, her numbers started tanking and taking bad, so she has withdrawn from the race. I think this might have ended her political career. We'll just have to wait and find out whether or not she runs for re-election to the Senate in 2024. Governor of Michigan, John James, has endorsed Ben Carson for president during one of the Carson rallies in Grand Rapids today, which only helps Ben Carson in the state of Michigan. However, he is from the state of Michigan, so we don't know how much this will help. In a rally at Albuquerque today, the governor of Mexico, Michelle Juan Grisham, has gone on to endorse Kamala Harris for president, which not many people are surprised by. However, this will help Kamala Harris in the state of New Mexico when the primaries come around. During a rally in Fairview today, Senator Mitt Romney has been endorsed by the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox. This is another one of those, we share a home state, I will endorse you in this race kind of thing. So this won't help Mitt Romney much at all. Another big announcement today, as a big name has dropped out of the presidential primary, this time on the Republican side. Tom Cotton has suspended his presidential campaign, the second dropout this month. We don't know. We aren't expecting any more dropouts, though anything is possible. Tom Cotton has ended his presidential primary after his poll numbers started dropping post-primary debates. During a Olympia rally today, AOC has been endorsed by Governor Jay Inslee. Jay Inslee says AOC is the best candidate when it comes to the issue of climate and has fully endorsed his or her Green New Deal policy. During a Pence campaign rally in Wichita, Kansas, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo came out to the crowd and gave his public endorsement to the former vice president, saying that he has worked closely with Mike Pence and he believes he is the better choice than the two current frontrunners to become president. We do have the fundraiser report, as every candidate has met the donor threshold, or every candidate that's still in the race anyway. Chris Sununu has 15,300 donations. Tammy Baldwin has 7,200 donations. Sean Fetterman has 15,300 donations. Ruben Gallego has 3,400 donations. Amy Klobuchar has 5,200 donations. Rick Scott has 12,600 donations. Deval Patrick has 5,500 donations. Jared Polis has 6,500 donations. Sherrod Brown has 15,000 donations. Tom Vilsack has 7,200 donations. Stacey Abrams has 5,000 donations. Jim Justice has 13,400 donations. Ben Sass has 4,800 donations. Greg Abbott has 9,300 donations. Kristi Noem has 8,400 donations. Mike Lindell has 6,500 donations. Ben Carson has 6,200 donations. Kanye West has 9,400 donations. Charlie Baker has 8,300 donations. Larry Hogan has 5,100 donations. Andy Beshear has 5,400 donations. Michelle Obama has 5,700 donations. Kirsten Sinema has 15,200 donations. Mitt Romney has 6,000 donations. Josh Hawley has 5,400 donations. Mike Pence has 5,400 donations. Ayanna Pressley has 5,600 donations. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has 9,800 donations. Howard Schultz has 28,400 donations. Roy Cooper has 5,300 donations. Tulsi Gabbard has 5,600 donations. Mark Cuban has 6,500 donations. And Liz Cheney has 4,900 donations. Oh, the list continues. Look at that. Pete Buttigieg has 7,700 donations. Candace Owens has 8,400 donations. Kamala Harris has 5,300 donations. Nikki Haley has 5,300 donations. Chris Christie has 5,200 donations. Tucker Carlson has 15,000 donations. Ron DeSantis has 4,600 donations. Ted Cruz has 6,400 donations. And we do have some news for the third Republican and Democrat primary debates. The third Republican primary debates will be held on August 1st and 2nd, if necessary, and the location will be in Tallahassee, Florida. Requirements: you have to have at least 4,000 unique donors, you need to be top 18 in the national average by July 30th, and you need to have hit 3% or more in 4 state polls or more. And for the third Democrat primary debate, it will be held August 8th, and if needed, the 9th. The location will be in Indianapolis, Indiana. The requirements for such: 4,000 unique donors, 3% or more in the national average, and 3% or more in 3 state polls. And it will be hosted by ABC News. And of course, we have the lineup for the second round of Democrat and Republican primary debates. For the July 4th Democrat primary debate, it has been randomized. As random as possible. In the first debate, we'll have Howard Schultz, Ayanna Pressley, Jared Polis, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at center stage, Mark Cuban, Roy Cooper, Tom Vilsack, and Ruben Gallego, who did not appear at the first debate. And then the night 2 debate that's being held on July 5th, we'll have Deval Patrick, Tammy Baldwin, Stacey Abrams, John Fetterman, Pete Buttigieg, Sherrod Brown at center stage, Michelle Obama, Tulsi Gabbard, Kirsten Sinema, and Andy Beshear. For the Republican primary debates, night 1, that'll be held on July 11th, we have Ted Cruz. Well, they do the same way they did last time. The bottom 10 will be on night 1, and the top 10 will be on night 2. Ted Cruz, Kanye West, Mike Lindell, Ben Carson, Ben Sass, Kristi Noem at center stage, Jim Justice, Charlie Baker, Chris Christie, and Liz Cheney will be on the bottom tier of the debates. And for the main stage of debates, night 2, July 12th, we have Greg Abbott, who was on the bottom stage beforehand, Mike Pence, who was actually on the main stage, my bad, Larry Hogan, who was actually on the bottom tier last time, Josh Hawley, Tucker Carlson, Ron DeSantis at center stage, Chris Sununu, Mitt Romney, Rick Scott, who was on the lower debate, and Nikki Haley, who was also on the lower debate. So we have a couple changes here. And so we currently have 41 major candidates running for president. 21 Republicans and 20 Democrats are still in this race. The Republican candidates so far: New Hampshire Senator Chris Sununu, Florida Senator Rick Scott, West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, Nebraska Senator Ben Sass, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, Minnesota Governor Mike Lindell, former HUD Secretary Ben Carson, rapper Kanye West, Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, Maryland Senator Larry Hogan, Utah Senator Mitt Romney, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, former Vice President Mike Pence, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, activist Candace Owens, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, New Jersey Governor former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, news host Tucker Carlson, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Now going on the Democrat side of things, we have Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin, Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, former Minnesota Governor Deval Patrick, and Colorado Governor Jared Polis, Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, Georgia Governor Stacey Abrams, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, former First Lady Michelle Obama, Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, businessman Howard Schultz, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Hawaii Governor Tulsi Gabbard, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, businessman Mark Cuban, and Vice President Kamala Harris. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it's been a long time coming. Hopefully I'll get these videos out more often. There is a new poll in the description. Hopefully I'll remember to put it in this time. Go follow my Twitter at Chaotic Politics. This is the Chaotic One saying peace.